Hello, welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. NATO's eastern flank is challenged, but has the potential to cooperate and demonstrate unity as the countries of the region invest in defense and security. This was one of the messages conveyed this week by regional defense ministers in Warsaw as they met at the Defense 24 Days conference. But in the meantime, Latvian airspace has been violated by drones. U.S. troops are being relocated out of Germany, and while Operation Epic Fury may have ended, the situation in the Middle East is far from clear. Joining me now to tell us more is Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defence College. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Marie. Great to be with you.
So I just wanted to start with the latest news that has emerged. President Trump has just announced on Truth Social that Russia and Ukraine will swap 1,000 prisoners of war, each as part of a 3-day ceasefire for the observation of Victory Day in Russia this weekend, starting tomorrow. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a particularly challenging situation because, of course, the parade tomorrow is being taken under specific considerations because Putin is correctly fearful of potential strikes from the Ukrainians, and the United States is distracted with Iran. But of course, this is something that has been quite a long effort by Trump and his special envoys to try and come to some type of agreement between Russia and Ukraine. And so I think this is an attempt to of a show of good faith, if you can even use that in a sentence where the Kremlin is involved. But I think it's probably just to try and de-escalate the situation, because the Ukrainians have shown that they have potential and they have willingness to strike targets inside of Russia. Of course, that would be something that would infuriate the Russians on a different level. So this is a cautious diplomacy, and the large number of POW swaps, I think, is something to try and make sure that it lasts for only a couple of days. But President Trump has said that they're getting closer and closer with each day to ending the war, which I'm not so certain that that's actually the case. And so I think it's the U.S. trying to make sure also that they maintain some type of diplomatic cloud over the situation.
Well, we saw Russia and Ukraine previously announce separate ceasefires on different days, so much so that essentially we've been in until now, it was considered that there really wasn't a ceasefire, so to speak. The understanding now is that there will be a suspension of all kinetic activity from Saturday through to Monday. Zelensky has confirmed, he's expressed his gratitude, but it comes as a bit of contrast, really, because we've just had Secretary of State Marco Rubio say something along the lines of that the United States is prepared to be a mediator to end the war in Ukraine if it can be productive, but added that Washington does not really want to waste its time if the effort is not moving forward. And then we have this announcement coming from President Trump. So it really does come as a little bit of a contrast. How do you read that?
Well, I think that they want to make sure that they are seen on the global stage as still being engaged in the issue. A lot of their attention is directed now towards Iran and that ceasefire, not ceasefire. And I think that is something that likely President Trump wants to prioritize in terms of wrapping that up. But I think it gets to the bigger picture of why it would have been beneficial to draw in European allies with this. Now, of course, that would have been harder with Putin, because Putin only wants to talk to President Trump or at least his envoys on the issue. But I think that the major thing is that the Ukrainians have now taken the fight to Russia with drones, and they have a superiority there, and Russian ground forces are not able to push the Ukrainian forces back. So on the tactical level, on the battlefield, there's almost a stalemate, but Ukraine has the upper edges, of course. So what Russia can do is just continue to bombard them. And I think as I said earlier, the Trump administration and President Trump himself has spent a lot of time, even before he was reelected, saying that he was going to be the president that ended this, and that's not something that he's been able to do. Now, about the favorable conditions, well, favorable to who? Because a lot of the aspects that are put on the ground are some of them are not so favorable to Ukraine, and of course that they should be. And I think it goes back to the level of engagement that he's had with Putin on this.
Right, now I just want to move on to some more regional developments. We've had former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen make comments regarding a new European defense alliance. So he's always been very pro-American in the sense that he believes that the US should be involved in Europe's security architecture, but he believes that NATO in its current form is no longer really sufficient because there are increasing doubts over US security guarantees. What do you think of that idea of developing a new European defense alliance?
Well, I don't think that it's very productive. I mean, yes, there are certain statements that are made by the current U.S. president, President Trump, that are maybe perceived as detrimental. And of course, the way in which you portray a message definitely carries weight. And, you can look at this in one of two ways. I mean, if you look at what the U.S. is doing, even the troop reductions, I mean, that some of those troops may or they may not go to NATO's eastern flank, particularly in Poland, the ones that will be coming from Germany. But the message from not just the Trump White House, but other presidents before, and in fact, several administrations prior to both of Trump's administrations, have wanted the Europeans to spend more. Now the ask is to spend more and do more. And, Europe, including Germany, has actually answered that call and has done that. And I think that the overlying message that I would like to say is that there are a lot of American policymakers on both sides of the aisle, including Republicans, who are very pro-NATO, who are very pro-Ukraine, and do not want to see the U.S. diminish their role in the alliance. And so I think these calls could be worded slightly differently, to include the United States and to try to work with this current administration rather than contribute to a potential rift. Because right now, I think a lot of the perception that is of statements made by the U.S. president, and I'm not saying that they are reassuring, but if you look at what Secretary Rubio says, what the United States Perm Rep Ambassador Whitaker says, these are all very positive things. The clear message has been that this administration is not going to do European security for Europe, but that they will remain inside of the alliance, and they will work with other allies, Europe and Canada included. So I think that type of rhetoric, it doesn't really help. A new European defense alliance, so there's going to be a new NATO without the U.S., or what is that? How do you deal with command structures? How do you deal with everything? I think the best thing to do is maintain alliance cohesion. So I think those types of things, those types of statements, and they're made by a lot of people, they don't really, they need to emphasize other allied partners in Europe preparing for a better defense posture, but working alongside with the United States.
Sure. Now, I wanted to just move on to the Latvian airspace violations. First, we hear that they were Ukrainian drones. Now there are reports that one of them was Russian. Have any more details emerged in regards to that investigation?
Well, yeah, two of them crashed, and the third drone changed course and returned to Russia. So it's likely that two of them were coming from Ukraine, and one of them came from Russia. But some of the drones were not flying in a straight line, and so they were less easy to predict and prepare for. And I think one of the main and current challenges in air defense is the difficulty of detecting drones in the first place. It's not that it's impossible; it's just that they're smaller and they fly at lower altitudes, and so the kind of classic air defense systems are really designed primarily to detect and counter larger targets. And the air system is being completely rebuilt, and there are a couple of ways to sort of monitor this. And one of this is an ongoing process, and emerging technologies in warfare, as we see with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the developments are very, very quick. And so keeping pace with developments, you have to be equally as quick, but you can't be equally as quick. So you have to be as quick as possible for this. And so right now, of course, politically, Latvia is going to have a national election in October. But even if they weren't going to, Latvia is an eastern flank country. And so these types of things naturally trickle down politically. And the prime minister has said that this is going to be addressed as soon as possible. And of course, the armed forces are really on top of this.
Sure. Now, I just wanted to move on to Operation Epic Fury, which, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he told reporters on Tuesday at the White House that it is over and that the objectives of that operation have been achieved. Are you able to just list those objectives for us? Just remind us what those objectives of that US-Israel war on Iran were, what those objectives that have been achieved, what they are, and what comes next. Because I just saw some reports telling us that actually that war hasn't been concluded. So there are a lot of misleading narratives that are out there at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think, for clarity, because a lot of the narrative seems to be changing. I mean, both Iran and the United States are saying that each party controls the Strait of Hormuz, which obviously, can't really be in effect. So I think initially the first objective, well, first of all, if you enter into a war, you should have an objective. You should have what it is that you want to achieve by using lethal force in the first place, and then you should have a strategy about, okay, once this is achieved, what is the exit strategy if kinetic fighting happens, but it's lower than the initial phase of an actual hot kinetic war. How do you deal with all of that? But first of all, it was preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And then I think the second thing was regime change. Well, okay, the regime didn't change, but the Ayatollah changed. And so that was one aspect. So in a way, it hasn't been met, but in a way, sort of it was, because they were able to take out the last Ayatollah. But now I think that very much there's two ways, and one feeds into the other, that we can say who has the upper hand and who was on the who was winning, quote unquote. One of them is let's say tactical and operational advantage with the Strait of Hormuz, and the second one is information space and stratcom, and how each country is doing in this conflict is perceived by international audiences. I think that is one of the huge aspects of this, is which country has information space dominance. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of confusion here, because the U.S. and Iran exchanged fires during a so-called ceasefire, which President Trump says is still in effect, and then he says that this war is over, and then there's a new operation. But U.S. forces targeted Iranian military facilities, and they had said that these facilities is where an attack on U.S. warships originated near the Strait of Hormuz. Then Donald Trump said a lasting peace is some way off, and then Iran started targeting the UAE, which is a very close U.S. ally in the region. And we're supposed to hear that today that was a deadline for the deal, and the U.S. Secretary of State said that Iran can't control the Strait of Hormuz. So what the Iranians have said is that the U.S. proposal is under review, but that they will make an announcement when the Iranians reach a final decision on this. So I think that it's a bit. I think we're still a ways off because the U.S. has definitely hurt Iran with the issues in the Strait of Hormuz, but not to the extent that I think that they would have liked, because the U.S. has not really been able to completely achieve their goal of compelling Iran to make any major concessions. But that said, the results of the blockade have hurt Iran, and they've had to trim their oil production and press derelict tankers into service. So there is, I wouldn't say that the U.S. is behind. I would say that they're kind of evenly matched, and we're almost at an impasse right now. I would not say that Iran has the upper edge. Maybe in information space, because a lot of these videos and memes that are coming out. But the U.S., I think the U.S. has not really directly countered them, and that could be because there are two plausible explanations for that. One, the administration isn't really bothered by it, and two, which probably is also the case, the U.S. State Department agency and groups that were responsible for countering such propaganda were largely gutted when Doge took place a while back during the initial months of the current administration. So I think that we're not going to see too much progress on that either in the next coming days.
All right, we're going to have to pause our conversation there and carry on some other time when we catch up on this. Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defence College. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And that is a wrap for World Talks. Thank you so much for being with us here on TVP World, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye.